Is Sean Diddy Combs really innocent? Or did he just get away with something again? When the jury returned a not guilty verdict, the courtroom gasped. But outside, the world exploded. Fans, critics, insiders, and entire communities across the internet were already bracing for a controversial outcome. But no one expected the blowback to be this intense. Because this isn't just about one man walking free, it's about what the world thinks he's still hiding. The trial itself was one of the most polarizing celebrity legal battles in recent memory. Over the course of several intense weeks, the court sifted through claims of misconduct, manipulation, and a long history of behind-the-scenes behavior that some say has followed Diddy for decades. From the very beginning, media outlets painted the case as yet another showdown between wealth, power, and accountability. And Diddy's name, already scarred by past controversies, added a layer of tension that kept every eye on the outcome. But when the verdict finally came, the room fell silent. Not guilty. Those two words hit the air like a punch to the gut. For some, it was a long overdue win for a man who's always claimed his innocence. For others, it felt like déjà vu. Another high-powered figure walking out the door, while survivors and critics watched from the sidelines, stunned. So, what actually happened in that courtroom? According to court documents and witness statements, the case centered on multiple allegations of abuse, manipulation, and controlling behavior behind closed doors. But the defense went hard from the start. Their strategy was simple: discredit the accusers, spotlight inconsistencies, and paint Diddy as the victim of a takedown attempt. They argued that everything being said about him was exaggerated, revenge-driven, or entirely made up. To be fair, some of the prosecution's evidence did raise eyebrows. One accuser's timeline had gaps. Another witness refused to testify under cross-examination. And a few crucial pieces of information, including texts and emails, were ultimately dismissed from the trial due to privacy laws. That was enough for Diddy's lawyers to pounce, and they built a tight narrative around the idea that there simply wasn't enough proof to convict. But here's the twist: a not guilty verdict doesn't mean innocent. It means there wasn't enough evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's a huge difference. Legal experts pointed this out almost immediately. In fact, some lawyers have gone on record saying the jury may have made the legally correct choice, even if public opinion screams otherwise. And public opinion? It's louder than ever. In the hours following the verdict, social media platforms exploded. Hashtags like Todd said Diddy verdict and was justice failed again started trending within minutes. Fans and followers weren't just reacting, they were raging. Videos of courtroom analysts questioning the jury's logic were racking up millions of views, while celebrities started posting cryptic messages clearly aimed at Diddy's acquittal. Even former collaborators, artists who once called Diddy their mentor, began to weigh in with not-so-subtle jabs. Some used emojis. Others posted throwback images with captions that hinted at regret, betrayal, or just straight-up confusion. And suddenly, it didn't matter what the court said, the court of public opinion had already declared its own verdict. But here's the thing: even if the trial is over, the storm isn't. Because what happened after the verdict has raised even more questions about what really goes on behind the velvet curtain of fame. Diddy may have walked out of court, but the truth, or at least the rumors, are still out there. And what came next shook the entire industry. Because this wasn't the end of the controversy, it was only the beginning. The courtroom may have gone quiet after the verdict, but the world outside went ballistic. Social media didn't just light up, it caught fire. Within an hour of the announcement, major outlets, influencers, and former collaborators were flooding feeds with reactions that ranged from confusion to outrage. And for many, this wasn't about Diddy beating the system, it was about the system once again failing those without power. The hashtag #BoycottDiddy began trending almost immediately. TikTok creators started posting clips compiling Diddy's past controversies, suspicious interviews, and unsettling behind-the-scenes stories from years ago. Twitter, or X, depending on who you ask, saw verified accounts sharing court transcripts, emotional responses from advocacy groups, and even celebrities throwing shade without directly saying his name. Some of the most telling responses came from within the music industry itself. Former bad boy artists, the very people Diddy helped put on the map, weren't exactly rushing to his defense. In fact, a few made moves that spoke volumes without a single word. Cassie, his former partner who previously accused him of abuse in a separate civil case that was quietly settled, posted a single photo, her walking away from a burning building. She didn't tag anyone. She didn't need to. The symbolism was loud and clear, and fans took notice. Then there was Mace, another former bad boy talent who's been subtly calling out Diddy for years. Right after the verdict, he posted a cryptic Bible verse about justice not always coming when you expect it, but always finding its way. Followers flooded the comments, connecting the dots, praising him for finally being vindicated. And it didn't stop there. Brands started reevaluating their partnerships. One luxury alcohol brand, once synonymous with Diddy's image, quietly removed several promotional photos from its site. A streaming platform allegedly postponed a scheduled retrospective on 90s hip-hop legends that featured Diddy as a centerpiece. Even some high-profile podcasts, which previously avoided speaking against him, suddenly became bold enough to ask, why are we protecting this man? That shift in tone spoke volumes. The narrative was changing, not just in social circles, but in mainstream culture. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to say it out loud. Maybe we've been celebrating the wrong people all along. And the most shocking part, even people within Diddy's own circle started acting different. One of his longtime producers was caught on a hot mic saying, "This was a close one, too close." A video editor who'd worked on Diddy's personal YouTube channel liked a series of tweets suggesting that money can't buy peace of mind. These weren't strangers. These were people who had built their careers off his brand, and now they were slowly, carefully pulling away. Of course, not everyone turned on him. A handful of A-list allies stood by his side, praising the jury's decision and reminding followers that innocent until proven guilty is still the law of the land. But even their tone felt defensive, almost as if they knew public opinion was slipping fast. What makes this backlash especially unique is that it isn't just fueled by outrage, it's driven by something deeper. Disappointment, because Diddy wasn't just another rapper, he was a mogul, a visionary, a so-called kingmaker who promised to lift people up. To now see his name tangled in the kinds of accusations usually reserved for industry villains, it's more than controversial, it's heartbreaking. And yet, the story doesn't stop with social media trends and deleted photos. Because while the public lashes out, there's something even more chilling happening behind closed doors. Former employees, NDAs, confidential settlements, private investigators, whispers of entire stories that never made it to the witness stand. What if the real reason Diddy walked free wasn't that he was innocent, but that the full story was never allowed to be told? Because while the court may have ruled, there's a growing sense that something was kept in the shadows. And what comes next could finally drag those secrets into the light. Because the jury may be done, but the investigation isn't. The courtroom heard a lot, but not everything. And that's what has people talking the most. Because as the dust settles from the not guilty verdict, more and more are asking what was left out. What parts of Diddy's story were kept from the jury, the press, and even the public? It turns out, a lot. From the very start of the trial, there were signs that this wasn't going to be a full picture. Key pieces of alleged evidence were ruled inadmissible. Some testimony was blocked for being prejudicial, and certain names, big names, were mysteriously left out of the official narrative. Behind closed doors, lawyers fought hard to keep the spotlight narrow. And for Diddy, that worked in his favor. Take, for example, the civil settlements Diddy has reportedly reached over the years. While some of these cases were known to the public, like Cassie's, others never made headlines. Industry insiders have whispered for years about quiet payouts, non-disclosure agreements, and victims who chose silence over scandal. According to one entertainment journalist, there are at least 3 settlements linked to Diddy's inner circle that were never formally linked to his name in court. But that doesn't mean they didn't happen. And then there are the claims from former employees, bodyguards, assistants, dancers, drivers, who've dropped cryptic clues about the toxic energy around the star. Some described being forced to sign strict NDAs. Others shared stories anonymously with blogs and underground media, painting a disturbing picture of power abuse, manipulation, and control. One former bodyguard even gave an interview years ago, suggesting that what the world sees is just the polished version of a very dark man. That interview resurfaced after the verdict, and suddenly people were listening, really listening. But perhaps the most unsettling part is how many people in Diddy's orbit have chosen to stay silent. In an industry known for spilling secrets the second the cameras roll, the silence is deafening. Why haven't more people spoken out or testified? Why did some witnesses back out at the last minute? Is it fear, loyalty, or something much more calculated? Some speculate that Diddy's influence stretches further than most people realize. That he didn't just build an empire, he built a fortress protected by legal teams, industry favors, and years of strategic partnerships. This isn't just about one trial, it's about a pattern of power, where accountability becomes nearly impossible. And while Diddy's lawyers focused on creating doubt, the prosecution reportedly had a pile of digital evidence they never got to use. Private messages, voicemails, security footage from past incidents. But the chain of custody wasn't clean. The sources weren't legally reliable. In short, it didn't make it to the jury, but it exists. Somewhere. Even some media outlets admitted they received tips during the trial, audio files, screenshots, old emails, but couldn't verify them in time. And now that the case is closed, these details are slowly leaking out bit by bit on Reddit threads, YouTube exposés, and podcast episodes that dive into what the court couldn't say out loud. All of this raises a disturbing question. Did the justice system protect Diddy or itself? Because allowing even part of the truth into the courtroom could have had a domino effect. Other celebrities, other executives, a wider, deeper rot at the core of the entertainment world. It's no longer about whether Diddy did something wrong. It's about what else he's hiding and how many people helped him keep it under wraps. And while the trial may have given him legal breathing room, it also cracked something open. Victims who once stayed silent are starting to talk. Journalists who once played it safe are digging deeper. And platforms that once gave him a pass are now asking hard questions. The verdict may have cleared his name in court, but in the eyes of the public, the jury's still out. And what comes next could be even more explosive than anything we've seen so far. Because the truth always leaks. And this time, it's already begun. Diddy may have left the courtroom with a legal win, but what he walked into outside those doors was a PR disaster. The public's trust didn't just slip, it shattered. In just days following the verdict, his name went from iconic to radioactive. And while the legal system gave him its blessing, the court of public opinion has all but declared him guilty of something, even if no one can officially prove what. His empire, built over 3 decades, is now bleeding credibility. Endorsement deals that once highlighted Diddy as a brand genius have gone eerily silent. A global beverage brand that once used him as a cultural symbol has removed his image from its latest campaigns. Fashion collaborations have paused indefinitely. And whispers inside the music industry suggest that certain label executives are advising artists to avoid aligning with him. For now. What's worse is that Diddy himself hasn't handled the fallout with grace. His response to the backlash? Evasive. Vague. In a video posted to Instagram just days after the verdict, he thanked fans for their support and claimed, "The truth will always win." But even that backfired. Comment sections were flooded with accusations, eye-roll emojis, and people calling out the difference between winning and escaping. Because it's not just about what Diddy says anymore, it's about what he refuses to say. He hasn't directly addressed any of the past allegations. He hasn't acknowledged the emotional fallout that victims and fans have experienced. Instead, he's gone quiet, retreating behind private jets, gated mansions, and PR statements that feel more like damage control than honesty. And that silence is speaking louder than ever. For fans who grew up idolizing Diddy, who saw him as a pioneer, a trailblazer, a man who took control of his destiny and inspired millions, this has been a betrayal. The same man who told artists to own their masters, build their empires, and stay authentic is now the center of one of the music industry's most disturbing chapters. It's a fall from grace that feels almost Shakespearean, and yet the story isn't over, not even close. Because while he may have dodged criminal consequences, for now, there are still civil cases pending. At least 2 former employees are reportedly working with attorneys to explore legal action related to workplace abuse and unsafe conditions. One former choreographer hinted at something darker, posting a cryptic message about what they made us do to stay in the circle. Beyond the lawsuits, there's the looming threat of new media exposés. 2 major streaming platforms are reportedly developing investigative documentaries that revisit the long list of allegations surrounding Diddy, with or without his cooperation. And those documentaries could become the tipping point, not just for him, but for an entire industry that's been built on protecting power at all costs. There's also a deeper reckoning taking place. Because Diddy's fall isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a larger shift in entertainment, a moment when audiences are finally starting to hold the powerful accountable, even when the courts don't. A generation that once worshipped the moguls of hip-hop is now asking harder questions about power, about manipulation, about who gets protected and why. And that's where Diddy's legacy really hangs in the balance. If the public truly turns on him, if fans, brands, and collaborators decide he's no longer worth the risk, then his empire may not survive. Not because of a conviction, but because of a cultural cancellation that hits where it hurts: influence, image, and income. The man who once said "can't stop, won't stop" might just be learning what it means when the world stops listening. And yet, Diddy has always been a survivor. He's rebuilt himself before. He's weathered storms. But this isn't just about bad press. It's about character. And unless something changes, unless he confronts the truth, whatever it may be, the next chapter of his career could be written by people who used to look up to him, but now want answers. So the question remains: did Diddy beat the system, or just delay the inevitable? Because if there's one thing we've learned in this era, it's that truth doesn't stay buried forever. It rises. It spreads. And when it finally hits, even the biggest stars can't escape its light. What do you believe? Justice served or truth denied? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. This story isn't over, and you won't want to miss what comes next.